Welcome back to the Christian Century YouTube channel. I'm John. I'm joined today by one of our writers, Pamela Lewis, who has written a recent piece for us called Does God Care What I Wear to Church? So we will be talking about church clothes. Before we dive into those themes, Pamela, hello. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Hello, John, and hello out there. A bit about myself. I'm a lifetime resident of Queens. I live in a part known as Rego Park, sometimes Elmhurst. My bedroom is in Elmhurst. My living room is in Rego Park. I'll put it that way. That's how much I'm on the cusp of those two parts of Queens. I'm a retired French teacher. I retired 10 years ago, and it's a very important part of my life and of my past, of course. But now that I have more free time, I'm doing more writing.
Great. Well, great. Well, thank you for sharing with us a little bit of who you are. I thought we might start off with what I hope is a fun question. You mention a couple specific outfits in the article, both some that you wore as a child, some that you wear to church now. I wonder if, as you look back on your life of church experiences, if there's a specific outfit you would like to tell us about, one of your favorites that you've ever worn to church.
Well, I think that now that I'm so deeply involved in church life, that answer is really dependent on what time of year it is on the church calendar. I attend a church that is very liturgically grounded, and it follows the church calendar. I'm an Episcopalian, and we do follow the church calendar very, very closely. So there are times of the year that will dictate, if you will, what I'm going to put on. And one of my favorite outfits comes around Advent. Advent, of course, precedes Christmas, and it is kind of a penitential time, but it's also a time for us to um, go inward a little bit. So my clothes tend to be a bit more subdued. I tend to like earth tones and darker shades at that time of the year. And I have a favorite sweater that has a velvet collar and velvet buttons, and it's red, and the collar and the buttons are black. And when we get into the Advent period, I love to wear this particular sweater with a black skirt most of the time, and it's very comfortable. It's very subdued and quiet. It's not dowdy-ish, but it's at the same time it says this is the time of year it is, and this is how I want to look. And so that's one of my favorite things to wear and to appear in at church.
That's great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Um, one of the parts of the article that I found really interesting, you talked about in the 80s moving to a different part of Queens and now then attending a different church. And you were noting some of the architecture of the building that the church was in and part of the way that worship was carried out and some of the clothing norms. And I wondered if you just wanted to make any more connections for us, whether thinking about that church or just church more broadly, connections we can draw between architecture, worship style, and the clothing that's worn by people when they attend.
That's a very interesting question. And the first time that I entered into my church, uh, everyone is absolutely gobsmacked by what they see, because it is a French high Gothic church. I mentioned this in the article. And you feel that when you go in there, and if you're going to keep going there, you need to look a certain way. The formality and the grandeur of the space is just very, very impressive. Statues, stained glass, wood carving. The architects and the builders put a tremendous amount of thought. They were trying to go back to a medieval model. And you think of the great cathedrals of France and Spain and Germany, for example. That is what they were going for, and it exudes some kind of way of being when you go into that structure. And I think that had a tremendous influence on the way people dressed. Now, we don't live in that time. The building itself dates back to the 1920s, but in those days, people were more formal, and they also conducted themselves in a very restrained and formal way, and I think that has some bearing on the way that people dressed and the way that they behaved. You would speak softer. You would not walk in a quick manner or make noise. You wouldn't have noisy shoes. And your entire way of conducting your personal self was somehow dictated by this architecture. You know, you see these sculptures, and they're very, no one is smiling in them. You know, they're very formal, as I said, and very grand, and it's telling us something. This is the way a Christian is supposed to behave. This is the model of being a follower of Christ, of being a person of God. Um, so all of that seems to have an influence on attire, I think. That has changed, as I say in the article. But if you're going to come into this space and spend an hour and a half here, and you're hearing very formal music as well, and you're reading and hearing from the King James Bible, all of this forms a whole of the way in which you are supposed to express yourself in church. There are no guitars. There are no drums. It's very, very high Anglican, the best of the last 900 years of a tradition. We have a men and boys choir that harks back, you know, to, as I said, the early Middle Ages. So in a strange way, all of this comes together to say, this is how you are to be. And when you are here for the period that you are, you're going to be different. It's saying you're going to be different and you're going to act differently than you do when you're outside. So I
Yeah.
think that had a tremendous influence on the way people dress, you know, suit and tie and good clothes and good jewelry. And you're not going to a barbecue, you're going to a worship service, and you should look that way.
Mm, thank you.
Yeah.
The last thing I wanted to ask you about, a moment near the end of the essay, you've been wrestling with this question, does God care what we wear to church? And you say, well, even though we can't really come to a firm answer on that because God's ways are mysterious and whatnot, you say, nonetheless, like clothing still matters. And you say it can help us communicate certain things, it can convey some of our values, our sense of self. And it can also help navigate. You say that the meaning we give to our clothes can help us navigate both interpersonal and professional settings. I wondered if you could tell us just a little more about that, and particularly that this navigation component of clothing I was really interested in.
Yes, it occurred to me that, you know, to the extent that clothes are signifiers of who we are, my identity to a certain degree, what station I occupy in life, uh, for better or worse, we have to admit that we are a class society. And so to that degree, I see clothing as telling me, I'm going to be going into this particular space today. And I may be encountering certain types of people who have certain types of occupations, who have certain beliefs, but I want to be prepared, and I want to be able to make my way um, successfully, if you will, when I go into that space. That's what I meant by the navigation. I am going into a setting that is going to maybe have certain expectations of me as a female, as a Black female, a female of a particular class, whatever those other particulars are about me. I've somehow got to communicate that, and I have to make my way through these other people that I might be encountering. Let's say if I was going to apply for a particular job. I remember when I was going to apply for a job at the school I taught in. And I was coming from one setting and I was going to be going into this particular setting. And I wanted to make a good impression. And I wanted to be able to navigate successfully the people I was probably going to meet in the course of that interview. It wasn't going to be just one person, but a set of people. And I knew something about the school and I wanted to be prepared. So that's what I mean by navigating. I hope that answers the question, but it's a dance. I see it as a kind of dance, a set of behaviors that I'm going to have to draw from in order to feel comfortable and to make the people I'm going to encounter also feel comfortable. I don't want people to feel uncomfortable when they meet me. So it's a two way dance, if you will.
Yeah, thank you. No, that does make sense and answer the question. And between the article and our chat, I think you've given me a lot to think about, and I think our readers and listeners, I'm thinking about the ways that clothes relate to so much more than just aesthetics, but identity formation, self-expression, power dynamics. I mean, there's a lot going on. So thank you. Anyone out there who missed this article, in the video description below, we will have the link where you can go and read it, and we'll have a bonus link as well. Since Pamela mentioned she does a lot of other writing, we'll put another great article from Pamela below so you can read more of her work. Thank you so much for chatting today, Pamela.
You're very welcome, John. It was a pleasure. I enjoyed talking about this very interesting subject. It continues to still hold a power over my mind. So I'm glad I had the chance to talk about it in print.